Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am not the Bill Shireman that you were expecting to host this meeting today. Unfortunately, Bill is in the hospital, but he is here and with us. But I'm primarily going to hold down the fort today to let Bill recover. Bill, did you want to get in there?
I will just say hello and welcome to everybody. I just finished up a procedure in the hospital, so I'm a little loopy still. But I am looking forward to our discussion today, and it's going to be exciting because it's about pro-activism and what a great set of folks we have to talk about how to end run the political system that sells advertising by keeping us at odds with proactivism, a positive approach, solution-oriented approach, not a compromise, not a distillation down, not a step back, but a step forward past war to actual collaboration. So I'm going to step back and out and let Doozy take the lead here.
Thank you, Bill. So, in case you don't know me yet, I am Doozy Casada, Chief of Staff to Bill Shireman and partner to him in convening these Leadership Circle meetings and the Leadership Circle program, in curating EarthX programming, and in delivering circular economy and democracy campaigns through Solution Citizen. Prior to joining Bill's team at the end of last year, I was Chief Operating Officer at Convergence Center for Policy Resolution, a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C., that brings leaders together across divides to develop collaborative solutions to public policy problems. So you can see why Bill and I get along. And a little bit about me is that I live in Oakland, California with my husband and a 3-year-old son. So what is the Leadership Circle? If this is your first time attending, we are a forum for philanthropists, corporate leaders, and strategists to learn, build relationships, and collaborate around pragmatic energy, climate, and democracy solutions. We operate these meetings under a series of terms of engagement that we've adapted from Joan Blains's Living Room Conversations that promote a positive and solutions-oriented environment. Very quickly, they are: be curious and open to learning, show respect and suspend judgment, look for common ground, be authentic and welcome that from others, purposeful and to point, and own and guide the conversation. We've also adopted EarthX's guiding principles of no demons, no denial, no excuses, and no delays. So let's get going. Today's meeting is called Pro-Activism, the Power and Practice of Radical Collaboration. If you've participated in the Leadership Circle before or know Bill Shireman, you might be familiar with the concept of pro-activism. As Bill was sharing earlier, he's a bit of an evangelist for pro-activism as a way of being in the world and addressing problems in positive, optimistic, and solutions-based ways. Today, Will Grant from the Pachamama Alliance is here to share his global work in pro-activism and the training system that they have created to support movements building a regenerative future. The goal is to build our skills as pro-activists, and then we'll hear from a couple of leading pro-activists who put this mindset and strategy into practice, namely Benji Backer from Nature is Nonpartisan and Kristen Sissener from Berkeley Earth. As you have heard, Bill is much more eloquent about the promise and practice of pro-activism, but I'll simply note that I think we can all agree that we live in a time in which pro-activism is sorely needed. And even though it has the word activism in there, you don't have to work for an NGO to be a pro-activist. It takes many skills, and we can all practice it to support our diverse goals. Bill, do you want to add anything?
I would just say this is, it is so easy to fall into the battle. When I talk to people about getting something done, they often say, well, I'm continuing the fight against blah, blah, blah. And it is so seductive to join a war against your enemies. But that war has been gamed now by the political and media system. It is a profit driver, and it's important for us to get past war look back at all the wars we've had since World War II, and we've won none of them except the Cold War and Grenada. And we've got 30 or more that we have lost. Let's not carry out a war to protect climate. Let's carry out a campaign to protect climate, collaborate with everyone we can on every element we can, disagree in certain areas, agree on other areas. Will Grant is here to explain the science of this, and then two of the practitioners of pro-activism are here to talk about the incredible work that they are doing. So I'm going to sit back and listen.
Sit back and relax and get. We all wish you well. So a brief introduction. Will is the Director of Community Action and Strategy at the Pachamama Alliance, a wonderful organization founded by Lynn and Bill Twist that helps people and communities restore our relationships with the earth and each other. Will has facilitated dialogues to bridge cultural divides with over 6,000 people and leads Pachamama's training program, which has incubated and launched 150 regenerative projects in 7 countries, ranging from reforestation in Kenya to interfaith climate coalitions in Florida to zero carbon city planning in Japan. Today, he's going to give us a flavor of the trainings that he usually does in longer format. So please keep in mind that if today inspires you to advance your skills as a pro-activist even further, he offers several courses for that. Will, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Ducey. Well, first, I want to start with saying that I'm so honored to be here at the Leadership Circle. I came to my first one last month and just so moved by the breadth of experience and the breadth of soul that I found in the conversation, and the dedication that people have coming from so many different directions to build a regenerative system. And so in talking about today's idea of pro-activism, I want to say, I think this is actually one of the essential questions of our time, as Bill has pointed out. Because I want to start with this question, right, which is that we have all the solutions that we need: the energy systems, regenerative ecosystems, agriculture, walkable cities, clean air. We can do it in a way that is cheaper, it is more economically thriving, it creates a future, and yet we aren't building it. And why? And I would point that that's an underlying factor, which is underneath it and often not discussed, which is that it's our cultural way of approaching politics and social change. Put simply, that it's focusing on problems, finding enemies, picking bad guys, and winning fights. And that is actually what is blocking progress. And that it's not any particular side. It's Republican and Democrats, left and right, conservative and liberals. And so pro-activism is a fundamentally different approach to politics. It focuses on solutions. It's seeing the strengths of the other side. It's finding common ground, but most importantly, it's using our differences as a lever to generate creativity. And it's often used as maybe just a mindset, as a concept or an idea, or a moral good stance that we ought to do if we were all better people, right? But as Bill said, it's actually a science. It's a different set of strategies and tactics and skills. And what I found over the 30 years of working in this is that it actually sometimes goes against fundamental instincts that have to be rewired and reworked. But when it does work, it generates solutions where progress seemed impossible and completely scrambles in really incredible ways people's ideas of who's on what side. And that's the source of creativity. So in this presentation, I want to talk about 4 key elements of pro-activism. And I'm going to give examples of implementation from regeneration, from politics, from corporate innovation, and from local on-the-ground community organizing. And so I do have a deck, which I'm going to, at the end of the presentation, I'll put the link to it in the chat, so you can all have a copy of it. But let me give me just a moment to set things up. Great. Okay. So the 4 elements of pro-activism that I want to talk about are: first, focusing on the world we want to build. Second, how we build is what we build. Third, co-creation, not compromise. And fourth, the importance of learning the actual skills, to go past a mindset into the science and strategies of that. And so let me talk briefly about where I'm coming from in this and what my experience is with this. So as Ducey said, I work with Pachamama Alliance. And Pachamama Alliance has been, and our sister organization, Fundación Pachamama in Ecuador, have been using pro-activism for 30 years. And in that time, Pachamama Alliance is one of the key elements of pro-activism is often bringing the voices that are not heard into the center of the dialogue. And so at the heart of Pachamama Alliance has been helping to weave together a political coalition of indigenous nations in the Amazon to begin to protect they currently protect over 20 million acres of the Amazon headwaters and some of the most important biodiverse regions in the world. But more than that, they've become a force in the politics of Ecuador and the Amazon and helping people rethink the entire way in which we're governing. And I think the most striking example of that is that in 2008, they were able to put the rights of nature into the Constitution of Ecuador. And it was the first nation state in the world that ever had that. And that is such a fundamental reordering of who gets to be at the table, to have the idea that it's not just what humans get to be at the table, but the idea that nature gets to be at the table and have a voice in our politics. And then we also have work in the global north and internationally with trainings. We've had about 90,000 folks go through our trainings in 100 countries and sparked just an enormous number of movements and organizations and people taking actions. And so my work at Pachamama Alliance, they asked me to come in 2020 and say, how do we take this philosophy and turn it into something that people can actually learn how to do? And so I created what's now called the Living Earth Community Action Training Program. And we've had about 300 graduates go through it in 7 countries. And we've launched 150 climate projects, which are in the pro-activist way of being. So let me give some examples of this because it puts it on the ground. So in Kenya, Mika Opando organized a network of 26 churches and schools, and they have planted over 300,000 trees in the past 5 years. Hill Cobran in Southwest Florida has created a coalition of 70 interfaith and environmental organizations in Southwest Florida, weaving them all together to begin to do policy together. Ingrid Edstrom in Oregon created the Accounting Alchemy Network, which is where she's training accountants to use the skills so that they can guide their clients to use regeneration in their wealth management systems. And they're now building a national training system with that. In Liberia, Christopher Yarwe created the Magic FM radio station, initially as a community center for information about climate issues, but now has shifted into, he is training journalists in Liberia to be able to shift the dialogue in relationship to forest and deforestation from extraction and economic development into the idea that there is a cultural grounding in being protectors of the forest and that the economic development of Liberia actually depends on them protecting their forests. He's now reshaping the entire dialogue in the media. And then Noni Strand is working in Kansas, where she's working with the Catholic churches to hold dialogues with farmers, but focus on the struggles of the farmers, the economics, what's happening to their communities, what's happening with their families. And then as they start to talk about the struggle, it creates a space to bring in the idea that the climate is changing, and it creates a space for them to begin looking at solutions. So with each one of those, these are folks who are going in and working proactively, often going across political divides. I mean, accountants and regeneration are usually not two things that people think about in the same sentence, but being able to have people recognize how they have a role to play in the creation of a regenerative future. So I want to start with this idea in pro-activism, which is from Leticia Nieto. And something that she said was, the truth is that we are all one. The reality is that we're not. So the truth is that we are one. The reality is that we are not. Like, it's easy to talk about this as a moral idea, and I think in our souls, most people understand the interconnection with other beings, but the practice of that in this political world is really difficult. So that's where I want to talk about the actual techniques of how this is being used. Okay, so like I said, the 4 elements that we're going to talk about are focusing on the world we want to build, how we build is what we build, co-creation, not compromise, and learning the skills. So, and I'm going to go about another 15 minutes, and then what I'm going to try to do is hold time for question and answers at the end of it. Okay. So I want to start with an exercise with this idea of focusing on the world we want to build. Take a moment, and when you think of the current politics and experience of being involved in climate politics, what are the words you think of, or what are the feelings that you have? And go ahead and put it in chat. Division, overwhelm, broken, charged, possibilities galore, discouraging, opportunity, trust. Great. Despair and resignation, right? I mean, I think that this list could go on, profit motive. The list could go on and on and on and on, right? And these are the politics that we're asking people to stay in and get focused on because the fate of the world depends on it when it's full of despair and mistrust. Okay. Now, take a moment and imagine that it's 15 years from now and everything that the regenerative movement has wanted to accomplish has been accomplished. We got it all. Solar, wind, regenerated forests, agricultural policy based on regeneration, right? Forest areas protected that there are 40% of the remaining wildlands, like walkable cities, right? Clean air, water that we can drink from streams, all of it. Just take a moment and just imagine that you were in that future and that you were walking through it, right? Walking through your town, walking through the forest that you love, knowing that it's worked. Imagine that you're there with your kids, your grandkids, or people that you love. Now, put those words or feelings in the chat. What do you feel as you're there? Relaxed, trusting, joy and celebration, living in unity, harmony. Peace. Everyone has had good intentions. Holistic health. Heaven. Blissful. Purpose. Yeah. Okay. So think how often in your work have you ever had someone who presents the world as it could be when all of this works? And I don't mean a few solutions. I mean like this image of what a regenerated world would look like and what it would be like to live in. Like how many times in your professional work have you come across that? I'll speak for myself. I search for this all the time on the internet. I'm looking for books and films, and it's almost never there. It's always fragmentary, or it's always focused on solar or wind or some amazing solution, but it's not a picture of the world as it looks like at the end. And it's almost never in the general dialogue, right? Climate is framed as problems and doom and destruction. And often the climate movement has been the ones who are focusing on this idea of doom and crisis, and solutions are fragmentary. And so when we do that, we focus people on the crisis. And so I want to play a short video as an example of this, as an example of the idea of starting with a solution we want to move towards as the way that should be the center of all of our communication. And it's from a man named John Liu, who did work in Northwest China, because back in the 90s, China took an area in the Northwest in the Loess Plateau. It was an area the size of France that had been just utterly ecologically destroyed by industrial agriculture. And they started to use permaculture and working with the local populations of integrating permaculture into the system. And they created what I'm going to show you. And I'm just going to show you 1 minute, 1.5 minutes of this video as an example of what I mean by talking about starting with the world we want to build towards.
When I first filmed Mr. Ta Fu-Yuan and his colleagues back in 1995, I had no idea this initiative could achieve such dramatic results. The effort that people put into converting their slopes into terraces has resulted in a marked increase in agricultural productivity. The higher yields are directly related to the return of natural vegetation in the surrounding ecological land. Now, when it rains, the water no longer runs straight off the slopes. Trapped by the vegetation, it sinks into the ground, where it is retained in the soil, taking weeks and months to gently seep down and irrigate the fields and terraces below.
So when I show that video in my work, what I have found is that the general emotional reaction people have is, well, whatever gets us to that, what do we need to do? We're not discussing policy. We're not talking wind, solar, but all these politics. People are like, even folks who don't necessarily think that much about the environment are like, yeah, that. Because there's this fundamental idea that we can regenerate the world. And the thing about that video that I find so powerful is that it's an experience. It's not an idea. It's visual. People often feel it inside of them. Right? And so what I found, because often we talk about, a regenerated world, a world without climate change, but one of the things that I found is one of the key elements of pro-activism is being able to communicate the end result early on in the process. But the key is that it needs to be, the way we describe it has to be vivid. It has to be something that people feel. It has to be something that they can see themselves in, that they're living in it. Because once they do that, that becomes the center that we work towards. Right? And that video is 1.5 minutes long, and it gets you right there. Right? And so the idea with pro-activism at the heart of it is that we are, instead of talking about what we are working against, we talk about what we're moving towards. But the power of it, what I've seen, is when people have something that they can feel in themselves and they can see themselves in it. And so there's a lot of techniques, right, which we talk about in our training of visualization and putting it in there. And even just if you notice, what I did at the beginning of this section is I just did a very fast example of that by having you think about where we are, but think about where we could be. And that emotional experience you had of thinking about that future, then that's what becomes the source of the action. Okay. Let me go to the next piece, which is how we build is what we build. And Ducey, can I get a time check?
Sure, you've got time. No worries. It's almost 10:10 Pacific time. If you got time.
Will, just a shout out. That was incredible. That film was incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, when I found that, I've been in love with it ever since.
Stunning.
Yeah. Thanks. Great. Okay. Okay. So this next idea, and by the way, somebody put something in the chat about the deck. I'll share the deck at the end, and I'm going to move back and forth between the deck. But I've never liked presentations where I'm looking at a deck and a person has something up in the corner. So I'll go back and forth between the deck and me talking. Okay. So how we build is what we build. And what I mean by that is that if we want to build the future, how we build it, the methods we use to build it is going to be baked into that future. And so if we get there through conflict and opposition, then that is going to be a part of the outcome. When we make winners and losers, right, that means that there are people who are going to feel that this future is about them losing, and they're always going to fight against it, even if it's in their interest. And I think often there's this idea in politics, which is, well, look, we're going to build this system, they're going to hate it, but then they're going to love it, and it's all going to be better, right? But that's just so often not how it works, because the scars and the patterns that get created in the process create the reaction. Right? And again, this happens on both sides. Republicans and Democrats do this. And it's at the core of this, something that I've been looking at, is that if you look at the politics of, for example, of a lot of the MAGA movement, it's the politics of grievance and silencing. They do not see themselves in the future that is being presented by the Democratic Party. And on the Democratic side, people often do not see themselves in the world that MAGA is looking at, especially folks who are many people of color, people who are trans, immigrants, right? But if you boil down what I've seen the core message of the Democrats for the past 30 years, which is that, well, you'd better vote for us or you're going to get the Republicans, right? And that's so broken. That isn't a vision of where we're moving towards. It's just the fear element of that, right? And a great example of that is the Inflation Reduction Act, which is, such an extraordinary set of bills that was done through business. But there were so many people who were not included in that process. And then the next election cycle, it's swept away. And that just keeps happening, right? And I think that's only going to accelerate. I feel like when I was growing up in, the 20th century, there was a stability to what was happening. But I feel like now one side wins and they just sweep away the work of the other side, right? And so how we build is what we build. So if we build through opposition, we're building in opposition. And people have to see themselves in what they love in the future. And then we have to build the muscles of co-creation. Okay. So let me now go to the third idea, which is that co-creation, not compromise. Because as Bill said at the beginning, this is not about compromise. This is not about slumping, about being nice with each other and slumping to compromise. Pro-activism actually has to be very hard-headed about power while being humble in seeing the ideas and views of the other side and building solutions that work for all. And that actually conflict is a really useful part of being involved in pro-activism, and that it's necessary and it's generative, because that's the process that pushes everybody into a new way of thinking if conflict is done well. And so I'm going to talk about this more extensively with this idea. And for those of you who know the work of William Ury, in the Harvard Negotiation Project, Getting to Yes, Possible, these books, a lot of it is going to come from him. I think it's an absolutely, it is kind of the touchstone for how to do so much of this pro-activist politics. Okay. So one of the reasons that hardcore debate is good is that it's how we synthesize towards the best approaches, because all sides usually have critical insights in this. And as an example, boiling it down, that conservatives often focus on personal freedom, not having government control, so that there's agency, the dangers of social engineering, and the pitfalls of dependency. Progressives have deep insights into power, into structural exclusion, historical multi-generational impacts of oppression, and then the power of inclusion. Okay? But so often, the fights over policies are pass over those and don't get to the fundamental values. And so we're debating the small piece when really what's happening is people are not seeing their key insights being included in this. And a friend of mine, Sharif Bashir, has a wonderful quote where he said, "In the US, our political camps are good at promoting their own light and pointing out the shadows of the other side. But they're not good at seeing their own shadows and seeing the light in the other side." So I want to give an example from politics and then also one in the corporate world of actually working with this idea of co-creation. So the first is in 2016, Van Jones and Newt Gingrich worked together to create criminal justice reform. And it's something that I saw in, Van Jones did a video shortly after the election of Trump. For those of you who don't know him, he's just kind of an icon of progressivism and also a CNN commentator. And he did a video where he was saying all the things that were going to get blocked, but he said, but I think we can work together on criminal justice reform. And he was right. So he started working with Newt Gingrich. And when I was researching this, what I found out is that Gingrich advised Jones on how to frame criminal justice reform as arguments for conservatives, telling him to emphasize how the system represented a big failed government bureaucracy that eats up money, eats up rights, and has no accountability, and to highlight Christian conservative values around second chances and redemption. He was not in there talking about liberation and the abolition movement and defund the police, right? He was going in there and finding that connection of the deeper frames of values and understanding where the people were coming from. And what Van Jones said was that something about this issue is bringing out the best in both political parties. And the bill was successfully passed, and it was the first significant criminal justice reform in a generation. On the business side, a great example of this is Nike. So back in the 90s, Nike was being hammered by the anti-WTO protests, right? Nike's brand was getting associated with sweatshops and environmental degradation, right? And the leadership started to panic and they went into greenwashing, right? Promoting a bunch of false alternatives and putting stuff up there, but it was all greenwashing. And then a woman who was working in the company named Hannah Jones saw an opportunity. What she did is she said, wait, let's take these two opposites, things that are perceived of as opposites, right? Which is thriving, fast-moving business and sustainability. And let's put them together. And she worked with the CEO and she created a team who their job was to use sustainability to force innovation. And this is what she said. We really started to look into what were the things with our business that could change or do better, such as our purchasing practices, such as teaching designers how to design with sustainability in mind. Sustainability moved from being a risk and a reputation function to being a business lever function to being an innovation function. With that designing in mind, they created an entirely new way of designing shoes that were called flyweave that reduced material intensity by 80%. And that they were able to capture and divert almost all of the waste away from landfill and back into their own systems. They also shifted their way that they generate power, in that now almost all of Nike's factories that they own directly are run by renewables. It's close to 100%. So they have pricing stability and control over their own energy. So the business case for sustainability, which I think everybody in this room knows, but back at the time, that was an innovation. And it's an example of taking opposites, putting the conflict and using it to be generative. Right? When you bring people together, when you get them out of the locked positions that they're thinking, and you start to ask them the question of, what are your values? What do you want to see happen in the world? What is the future that you want, right? And you share that. And then you start to say, great, what are ways that we could reach that together? That's what starts to turn pro-activism into a strategy of co-development. So the last piece I want to talk about is learning the skills. Oh, and by the way, in the deck that I'll put in there, there are links to there's links to articles about Van Jones, there's links to case studies of Nike's, and also William Urey's books. Okay. So the last piece of this is learning the skills and the new instincts, because fine, sounds great, but how do we do it? Because, and I'll just say, it's hard. It's really hard. Right? You're meeting with people who you deeply disagree with. You're meeting with people who deeply disagree with you. You may be meeting with people who feel that you have done harm to them. Right? And to be honest, it's hard enough for me sometimes to work with the people I agree with, right? Much less people who I disagree with. So what gets us there? And the key is that it's not tinkering or adding rhetoric, right? It's learning a new set of skills. And so now what I want to do is share the outline of the key skills we have that we use in our training as a way to walk through what these skills are. Moment. Okay. This will be the last part, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So what we do is we gather folks in, and what we have them do is they pick a project or something that they want to work on. And we walk them through the process of co-creation in their community or in their business or whatever context that they're working in. Right? And so the first thing that we have them do, and these are all the steps that I use when I'm using pro-activism, when I'm doing consulting with corporations or with governments. Right? The first is mapping the ecosystem's key people. Who are the decision makers? What are their beliefs? But more importantly, what are their values? Right? What are the things that motivate them? And really understanding those. Then it's when setting meetings with those folks, there's a skill in communicating a vivid vision of the future, right? So what I said, it needs to be vivid and lived in, and people are able to see themselves in it. How to do it concisely and from the heart, right? And then to start asking them, drawing them into co-creation dialogues with generative questions. And so what I mean is talking to somebody like, what is your vision of the future in this? What would be the ideal state that we would end in? What are the things that you want to see happen in the world on this topic? And then saying, so I want to offer some ideas, and I want to offer them, and here's the thought that I've been thinking of. How would are there ways that this could work in alignment with what you are trying to accomplish that would help you fulfill your mission or get you customers or get you voters? Right? What are the ways that what are the ways that the work that I am doing could feed into what you are trying to accomplish? Notice that these are open-ended questions that invite a conversation. And when folks have that and they're thinking about the future, they start to answer questions. And then we teach people that you're in a process of really deep listening, listening for their motivations, listening for what matters for them, listening to maybe even what they're not really willing to say. And as they do that, then the miracle of this is that people start to generate ideas with you, or they don't, and you end the meeting and you go on to the next person, right? So it's not a miracle cure. But what we find is people are so fascinated by having somebody actually ask them where they're coming from and what they want to see in the world that they're drawn into the conversation. They get excited about the possibilities. Another key piece that we work in our skills that is necessary is working across different cultures and power and learning how to navigate that. And I'll say we have a very different approach that I don't have the time to get into that is very different than what has come out of DEI. It is much more around William Urey's possibilists and an understanding of where people are coming from and finding out the ways in which they can create a common ground. Okay, so that is the process of co-creation. Then, as people start to make plans, that they do, the plans that they're making, and we have them create an action plan, but we build into it that is iterative and adaptive and dynamic. Because as they start to formulate the plan, they're going to be encountering other people who they also need to loop into the co-creation conversation. And a really critical piece is rigorous, transparent data collection. Constantly getting information, bringing it back to the group, thinking about what its meaning is, and the key piece is going and being open with the other people who you're in that process with. Going to the person on the other side and saying, yeah, we had this conversation and they panned this idea for this reason, this reason, this reason. Because that creates trust. And that is not just anecdotal, that you're trying to accumulate a really strong and broad sense of data. There's a phrase that we use, and it's capitalized as learning together, which is also shifting from individuals to the idea that everybody is in a learning process together. And we teach the tools and structures for people to how do you set up meetings so that they're co-learning processes, right? You're not trying to persuade anybody, you're trying to learn with people. Right? And so and we call it developing a collective spirit of inquiry, right? That deep curiosity is the strength. A friend of mine who does a lot of work in questions of power said the most powerful person in the room is the person who's the most curious, because they're the ones who are always going to find what motivates other people and be able to figure out how to work with it. Now, that's the structural process. The other part of our training that's so critical is the inner skills of doing this work, because it's hard, right? It's about developing the inner resiliency and the humility and the authenticity, like I said, to work with people who disagree with you or maybe even attacking, right? And authenticity, it doesn't mean about folding in the face of the attack, but being able to do the inner work to figure out what is true and to be able to stand in the truth while having the humility to acknowledge when I don't know something or I've got something wrong, right? So it's that ability to stay centered and present. A big piece of this that we work on, we call it rejection therapy, which is practice being rejected. Like do it all the time. Get good at being told no and being able to come back with ideas and how to listen and return into the conversation. One of the most important parts for us is also the connection with spirit, with the divine, with whatever religious tradition people come from, or just if they have a sense of spirituality, right? It's connecting to something larger than ourselves is the deepest well of resilience. And so many spiritual traditions have an idea that there is no other, right? That we can see to see your neighbor as yourself. And when you take that idea and you start to implement it in the practicality of politics with the practical tools of listening, of William Urey's techniques on dropping below position to hear and understand where people are coming from, of co-creation, then it becomes the actual implementation of that in the world. And a final piece that we find is critical for the environmental work is a constant relationship to nature. And so that's a part of our training. People are out in nature all the time when they've got to make big decisions. And whether that just means the beauty of nature, or to go back to the very beginning with the indigenous elders who teach us in Pachamama Alliance, that nature has a voice that we can listen to and that will offer guidance if we ask for it. Final piece of our training is that this all has to be experiential, right, and ongoing. So in our training, people are out in the community and connecting by the third week. They're making connections, they're getting out there with people, they're learning how to learn through action so that they're in a constant iterative process. Like I said, our politics are more of a co-learning process than a political campaign. It's an idea of learning how to learn together and building community. So I want to close by saying this, which is that when people are doing this training is demanding, right? I mean, clearly our training is actually, it's 12 weeks long and it's 3 to 5 hours of work a week. Because what we found is that we're not just teaching skills, people have to rework the way that they approach their community. They're learning how to be centered in conflict. They're reaching out to people who they haven't been able to reach out to before. But it's a time demand, but we're really proud of the fact that we have an 80% completion rate for a 12-week training that's online. Right? And what we found is that people do it because very quickly they're having conversations that change their lives in the first few weeks of the trainings, because these skills are so powerful. People are coming back saying, my God, I'm talking with the mayor. I'm talking with the people on the other side of the political divide. I'm having conversations that I never thought I would have. And they're building something together and they're creating solutions. And I want to name all those things that I talked about, the 300,000 trees, the Alchemy Network, the people working on the magic radio station in Liberia. These were like people who were good at their jobs, but they're working at a level that is way above their weight class. And the secret is because they don't have to be the experts. They're drawing people in who are experts and they're teaching them how to do it. And that's why this has been so effective at the grassroots level. And we've also found it is true for folks who are in leadership positions, that they're able to reach new levels of work. And the thing that I would say is the secret of all of it is that it is so much fun. Right? Regular politics is miserable. I was a legislative lobbyist. I've done political organizing and corporate fights, and I was weary and burned out. But the more that I work in pro-activism, the more that I find it's fun because there are no enemies. There are people who are out there who are teaching me. I'm getting into really hardcore disagreements and arguments with folks, but we're finding solutions together. And it's what regenerates me all the time. And that's what folks have said about doing this training. Because it is so fun to be in a conversation with somebody and just say, what's your vision of the future? What's the world you want to create for your kids, right? What would you like to build together, right? And that's the secret of pro-activism, which is joy. So I'll close there. And I'll put the link to this in the chat, and it has links to all of the trainings and everything that we do as well. And I want to, do we have a little bit of time for Q&A?
Yes, if you have any questions for Will or reactions, we welcome them.
Will, this is Randy McNamara in San Francisco.
Yep.
I am astounded how extraordinary that is. This is so brilliant and it's so actionable. I can hear the capacity to translate that into action. And it's a miracle to be able to create a program that is actually is inclusive. It isn't making the old model of adversary wrong and trying to fix it. It's a whole new possibility for people to work together. And there's no conflict in it. And it includes being able to resolve conflict. I just love it. I'm just stunned. I have 40 clients that I coach pro bono on realizing their mission. I want to share it with every single one of them. It's fabulous.
Thank you, Randy. That means a lot coming from you. Like I know you're connected with Pachamama Alliance over the decades, and thank you. That means a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Will, could I ask a question?
My name is. Let me go with John, his hand up, and then we can go to Tara. We can get you next. John, go ahead.
Hey, Will, great to meet you here, and echoing what Randy said, and it's great to have this all in one piece, and a lot of us have been using the word transpartisan to go along with this. Mm-hmm. And I think there is not just an exhausted majority out there, I think there's a hopeful majority out there that will resonate with this. So I look forward to working with you and many others about how literally this moves into the political arena.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. Tara.
So I went for a bike ride. I'm doing a regenerative rewilding project in southern Colorado called ONIA, and it means to in Lakota language. And I'm doing it in the way that they say you sing nature back and you connect in just all the things that your mission and vision. And my friend Nikki Beinstein's on the call. She's doing a kids in school program with a Breathe Bison book and teaching kids about sovereignty and connecting with the herd. And I really feel like we're going to sign up for your platform. My question is, because this morning when I went on my ride, I said to Creator, I said, bring me the most highest frequency people to help this keep going. And it makes me cry because my friend Myrna, she just sent me this talk. I didn't even know about it. And I'm like, oh my God, it manifested so fast. And my question, Will, is I believe in making good relations. And I wonder if you all, because ONIA is a regenerative rewilding center for people to physically come here and have experiences with nature. I teach breathwork and meditation. So my invitation and my question is, you do a live 12-week program. What about actual physical programs at different places where people are doing these projects? Because obviously, and I know Chip Cummins and I actually know John Steiner, I've met John before, is to actually bring people physically here in this unbelievable powerhouse group of people to have a connection with the project. Because I believe like we're not doing it, it's doing through us. And the more we fall in love with nature and sing her back, and then the answers come. So that's what my invitation, I want to ask you that question.
Yeah. Well, so let me offer this. This is a training that we've been evolving for 5 years within the Pachamama Alliance Network, and now we're going to be offering it out into the world. And we've got, we're going to be, and the format is, we've actually, and our focus is actually also on training trainers, because the key to it is moderators. And so two things, let me talk about it just a little bit in terms of what we're doing moving forward, also as context for the link that I put in the chat, which is that we're going to be working in two ways. The first is that we call it community, which is just people in their community being trained as trainers to be able to offer this training out into their community. And then also we want to work with partners. We want to work with other organizations. We've been talking with environmental organizations, government agencies, businesses, to be able to bring this training into their system so that they can adapt it and integrate it into whatever context they're working in. And we've built a really flexible training that it can be both online or in person. And I mean, I'll say, like, I love it being in person because it's in person, right? It's that physical connection that we have with each other. And then sometimes the power of the online is that we put together these cohorts of people. And when folks go through the training, they're put in teams of 5 people with 1 moderator. We call them action team. And we have action teams with people from Indianapolis and Mexico City and Toronto. It's like, and they understand that they're part of an international movement that is building this together, and that they're not alone. So even if they're doing some small local action, they're part of a global mosaic that is creating the world that we want to be in. And so the reason that I say all that is that one of the things we're proud of is that we've created a training. As we say, it's project agnostic. We don't teach people what to do, we teach people how to do it. And so that means whatever context folks are in, they can take this training and adapt it into what they want to do in their area, right? Does that answer your question? Or
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Carmen?
Yeah, you have put words to, I'm a word person, and you put words to things I've been intuiting or thinking about or just understand, but I haven't been able to articulate it. I want to thank you for that. I've got it, and so I'm supportive. I want to ask a question regarding what if you are dealing with a situation where it is not, there is no common, okay, so I'm working on a book that is basically trying to say what we're dealing with right now is not democracy. We are dealing with somebody that wants to change the system completely.
Right.
And in that regard, there will be no common ground. How does one address that bigger picture of saying, I don't want to have an enemy, but I have one?
Yeah. So let me talk at a couple of levels, which is that, let me say one piece by preamble, which is that I think it's always important in all of this to always think about what is the spectrum of possibility, right? And to work with the people who you could have common ground with. And so in this case, one of the things that I see is that what I see in a lot of the MAGA movement, what I see is that, I'll posit your statement that, we have somebody who is working towards authoritarianism in the presidency. But the base that supports so much of that move are not people who want authoritarianism, really. Like what they want is that they want a future that they see themselves in, and they don't see that with the Democratic Party, and so they go towards the Republican Party. We want people who don't want the level, kind of this radically inefficient, ineffective government. And so they're willing to say like, well, nothing seems to work, so let's go with Doge, right? It's like it is never monolithic, and there are whole areas to create, what William Ury calls the third side. It's when we allow the polarity to be what frames the debate, that's when we get into trouble. But when we say, what are all the other opportunities? What are the better ways that we could do this? That's what I think needs to happen within our current politics. Is that, and the other thing is, starting from the future that we want, right? If you say to folks like, describe to me the future that you want, the vast majority of people in the MAGA movement will say, I want a free country. I want to be left alone. I want to not be told what to do. I don't want a government that messes with my business. Great. We are in alignment. Now let's talk about how we get there. And is that where we're headed? Because, why are you supporting somebody who does this? What are the alternatives to that, right? So it's the element of seeing the multiplicity of possibilities and creating third ways, because whenever it gets locked into polarity, it's going to be win-lose. People have to choose sides. That's where we are. And a lot of people are clearly choosing that one side that you're not in agreement with. Does that get to, that's a short answer to an extremely massive question, but yeah.
No, that helps. That helps. I've got to sort out my book structure, but yes, that helps.
Great.
I'm afraid this is the last question for the moment, and we'll probably have more time at the end.
Okay, great. Let me let's see, John. I think you had a. Did I skip you before? Have you gone, or because I want to go with somebody who hasn't gone? Could I go with maybe Samir?
Sure, John. Sorry, you had your hand up. Maybe you want to share your question in the chat.
John, go ahead.
Or John?
If it's this John, I asked it.
Okay.
Great. Let's go with Samir.
That's not a problem. If somebody wants to ask, they can ask. My question is very simple.
Yeah.
Like, actually, we are like-minded people, and we are here today, and we are listening to you because we want to work on this area. So normally what happens, we do presentation, we listen to presentation, and whenever we want to work something, we are not willing to because of connection and all this. So what I believe, we should create a WhatsApp group of all these people, and so that we can add ideas whenever we have, and then we can connect also with the people. LinkedIn is not useful because in LinkedIn we don't open LinkedIn every day. So LinkedIn is not useful. That is what my idea was.
Thank you, Samir. So let me just kind of say something in closing. I'm going to put some links in the chat of some trainings that I put, and I'll put it all in one little post. It'll have the training that we're starting to do. We are also offering our first training of trainers that'll happen in October. I'm also going to put the link with an organization, if I can make a small plug, called Yes. It's an international network of facilitators. We work in 7 countries, and we do these week-long deep dives on the connection between interpersonal and systemic change. And it is the most extraordinary training that I have found to be involved in this idea of how to really stay and encounter people who have difference. And by the way, we're doing a retreat in California in early September, and we have 2 slots left. So I'll put the links in there, and if anybody's interested, please email me as well. Thank you, Ducey.
Thank you, Will. I'm sure that there's a lot that sparks so much within people, and hopefully we'll have time also at the end to continue that conversation. But as we shared earlier, we've teed up a couple of leading pro-activists to share about their work and how they use the principles of pro-activism in real time. And we're really excited today that Benji Backer is joining us. He founded the American Conservation Coalition, the country's largest conservative environmental organization, during his freshman year of college. No big deal. And today, he is the founder and CEO of a new organization called Nature is Nonpartisan, which is a movement redefining the environment as a nonpartisan issue once and for all. So Benji, can you tell us about Nature is Nonpartisan, what you've accomplished in the 4 months since you've launched, what you're currently prioritizing, and how you go about this work? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just a quick clarification question. How long should I think about these remarks and then Q&A?
Yeah, 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, and then we have some time for people to ask you a question or two.
Awesome. Great. Well, it's great to be with everybody today. And I know it's the middle of summer, so hopefully everyone's been able to get out in the outdoors. Like the last session really spoke to me because of not only the ability to move past partisanship, and I thought, Will, your answer to how to deal with people that you are adversarial to or the enemy are not actually your enemy. I thought that was really, really a great tee up for what I'm about to talk about, which is that I believe firmly that nature and the environment should not be a partisan issue. I think it should be one of the things that transcends partisanship. And instead of debating the problems, we should be debating the solutions. The environmental movement in America's past used to be caught up in that sort of dialogue, and today it's focused on being a culture war issue so unnecessarily. So what we've done in 4 months ago, we launched Nature is Nonpartisan. We believe that this is going to be the future of the environmental movement. We want to kind of rebuild America's environmental movement. Half of our team is liberal, half our team is conservative. Our board is split the same way. And so we're intentional about having representation from across the ideological spectrum. And no on board calls, which we have one tomorrow. People are not bickering the whole time. We're actually figuring out where that Venn diagram of overlap exists and figuring out how to push for policy in a way that moves the needle no matter which side is in office. For those of us who care about the environment, we don't want to wait until the ideal scenario happens politically for us to make progress on environmental issues. So we have stood up a 501c3, and in 4 months since launching kind of this vision, we've done 3 huge things just in 4 months that I think people would be shocked to know that a group that small could do. First is we were kind of the lead spokespeople who helped stop the public land sell-off that was proposed in the Senate bill in June. It was 3 million acres that was going to be sold off. And we had the biggest public cultural change attached to our role. We had over 25 million people engaging with us on social media. And they ultimately stopped proposing that because of the pushback. But it wasn't just from the left. It was from the left and the right. So we showed what was possible in being against something across party lines. On top of that, we gathered 30 CEOs of the largest conservation groups in the country, groups like the National Park Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, National Wildlife Federation, and we all sat down in Arizona together for a historic gathering to come up with not just what we're going to be against together, but also what we're going to be for together. And there's 9 pages of policy ideas that 30 groups that truly span the political spectrum all agreed to push for together. And now we have the tough challenge of figuring out of those 9 pages what we're going to push for first. And then the last thing that we did was we actually worked with the Trump administration to get an executive order done called Make America Beautiful Again. And it kind of goes to what Will was saying about, our philosophy with that was let's meet the administration where they're at. Let's use their language and get something done for conservation. And so what that executive order did, and I know that like wording might be uncomfortable for people, is that we wanted to get a commission started in this administration to solve big environmental problems. And so now there is a commission within this administration to solve big environmental problems. And we as an organization are in charge of convening the stakeholders from across the political spectrum to get their voice heard in one-on-one or small, group meetings with cabinet secretaries and other key leaders in the administration. We already have been doing that. And so if there is going to be some progress made in the right direction on the environment, we are really helping bridge that gap for the next 3.5 years. So, really what we're going to do for the next 4 years, the next 8 years, the next 12 years is build a cultural movement that shows politicians that regardless of what side they're on, they should be expected to make sensible conservation and environmental action. But then also make sure that because of that, we work productively under any administration. And, again, it really will your comments about understanding that actually at the hearts of most people in this country, they want a lot of the same things. And they just don't know how to really put that energy in this current political moment, especially given the divisiveness of social media and the news media being incentivized to divide us. But deep down, people want the same things. They want healthy communities. They want clean communities. They want safe communities. They want a better future for their children and grandchildren. And it doesn't matter if they're a Trump voter or a Harris voter. That's what they want. So we're really excited about the accomplishments we made in 4 months. I think if we can do that in 4 months, we can do a lot in the years ahead, and just really grateful to have the opportunity to share the work with a group that obviously has a lot of the same values, and trying to have that transpartisanship or transcend partisanship, which is something that our country so desperately needs. And I think the environment could be the issue that we start to do that first on.
Thank you, Benji. John Steiner, you had a question for him.
Hey, Benji, good to see you again. Is it possible to put in chat what you were doing with the CEOs of the 30 groups, as well as Make America Beautiful? And great work. Deep bow.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. Yes, I can put that in the chat when the next speaker is speaking. And then if you have any more questions, I'll also put my email in the chat as well.
Any other questions for Benji or reactions to that? I know we're very impressed by the way you go about your work.
Benji, is there a way to reach out to you? I'm a devoted. I've been working with the Texas legislature, but I'm such a lone wolf, and I really, I got a bill written, HB 4244, to track garbage per capita in the state of Texas, which would increase jobs, and 10 jobs for every 1 job at a landfill. Anyway, and save land. I just can't seem to. I'm fought by the waste management industry, and even Keep Texas Beautiful would not sign the endorsement letter because of the underwriting of waste management. I'm not fighting waste management. Again, I want them to see that the future includes alternative ways to manage, turn the waste stream into a revenue stream. Damn it. I'm sorry. Anyway, I would
That's
really
awesome.
appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't know how to reach you. I've read about you many times, but I don't know how to reach you.
I just put my email in the chat and would love to read about what you put together, and
Okay.
also on the last question I put the links there too.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara.
Chip.
Great. Hey, thanks.
Great to
Hey,
see you.
Benji. Good to see you again. It's been a long time. I'm really so impressed with your leadership and what you've accomplished, and putting together these 30 environmental groups and getting that done. It's a great approach. We'd love to work with you over here at AREI, and invite you to the next R Day, which we're planning for 2026. We don't go annually ever since COVID, like many conveners, but when we go big, as you know. Anyway, in terms of this meeting today, and also our ability to work together and find our commonality, and I love what you just said about getting together what we're against, and then also getting together for what we're for, and differentiating that. But also, thank you for stepping up to the plate on saving our public lands. That's a huge accomplishment. And I think that we all have to sort of figure out, what makes us Americans, and what brings us together now at this a critical moment in time, so that we can, plot a sensible path forward. So I just wanted to, say good job.
Well, Chip, great to see you, and always happy to come join you in Colorado for really anything, including a hike or whatever. But also a great event that you always throw. So definitely would love to keep in touch on that, and great to see you. And I loved, your comment about, kind of makes me think about the Venn diagram of what we are for versus what we're against. And I do think, to Will's comment, there's also a really important thing that we need to practice as Americans, which is not doing the all or nothing thing in our day-to-day lives. Just because we don't like Trump or Trump voters or Harris voters on X doesn't mean that we don't agree with them on Y, and we should be able to call balls and strikes in our lives and say, we agree on this, we don't agree on that, but the thing that we do agree on, we're going to work on together. I can tell you with the public land sell-off proposal, there was a lot of unlikely stakeholders that came to the table. You had the Patagonias and the Leonardo DiCaprio's, but you also had Sydney Sweeney, the famous actress, and then you also had some of the biggest militia far right people all fighting for the same thing. And of course, they disagree on a million other things. And that shouldn't be ignored. But in that moment, when you're standing together for something, you have to put those things aside. And Americans used to do that. And I think it's just a really important practice for us to all look towards. So really big opportunity to move forward. And I'm aware that there's a speaker after me, so I don't want to take up too much more time, DC, but I really if there's time for another question, I'll take it. Otherwise, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Well, I don't see any other questions, but really appreciate your time. And we will also, after this meeting, email around more information about what Benji's up to. Okay, Walt, did you have a quick question?
It is, Benji. You and I met a couple of years ago at EarthX. It was fun to get to know you there. And
I remember that.
Yeah. So I just want to speak it into the space that the work that Bill's doing and having this conversation about proactivism, which was highly featured at that EarthX conference, is really similar to a model that's emerged called the 4B model, that we have to build and we have to bridge and we need to block and we need to do all those things with enhancing belonging. And so the kind of work that Bill's doing with this forum, we're trying to take that writ large with a sort of an inter-movement, League of Movements conversation for strategies. And this sort of principle will be at the center of it. And your work is really exemplar in that. So I just wanted to thank you again. Heap praises on you, heap praises on Bill, and sort of get this into the record that stay tuned. There's going to be more connected convenings where proactivism can spread beyond the environmental focus into the, defending democracy and all the other complex issues we have to work on. So if you want to say anything about that, I appreciate it. But otherwise, thanks very much for your good leadership and work.
Well, thank you. And I'll leave with this, that it does just start with the environment and nature, in my opinion, but it has to extend to other issues as well. So I really appreciate you saying that, Walt, because it's 100% true. And, we don't really, honestly, none of the issues we talk about matter if we don't solve the ability to work with each other again, because we will just continue to be in this visceral, divisive and harmful moment that we're in, and it won't get better over time. It'll get worse, and I think we have an opportunity to turn it on its head, and I see the environment as a key first driver of that. So thank you, and I'll hand it over to Kristen and DC. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Benji. So Kristen Sissener is the executive director at Berkeley Earth. At a time when federal cuts are slashing or eliminating crucial climate programs, Berkeley Earth is one important organization stepping up to fill much needed gaps in climate monitoring and data products. I'm going to quote Bill Shireman here and say, Berkeley Earth may now be the single most important source of reliable global to local climate data. He is so impressed. He's been a board member of theirs for a while, and he's so impressed with the incredible contribution that Berkeley Earth makes, and with very limited resources. So, Kristen, please tell us more about what you're up to in this moment.
Absolutely. So happy to be here. I am such a big fan, both of Benji's. So it's a very tough act to follow, but I'm honored to follow Benji's great work, and also to Bill and Ducey for your work with Solution Citizen and this Leadership Circle organization. I think the stories that I hear in these meetings are so much more compelling, and I think very different than a lot of the stories that are told generally in the overall climate narrative. So very happy to be here. I'm going to follow Will's incredible presentation and Benji with some discussion about climate data, which I know isn't always everyone's the most exciting topic, but I am just going to talk briefly about our work. I have a few slides. I will go through this very quickly and hopefully leave time for any other questions that there might be. So very quickly in brief, Berkeley Earth is an independent 501c3. We have been around for over a decade, and we're building essentially a new model for transparent and accessible climate monitoring. Just some quick stats about our organization. I won't go into these, but we've been around for a while. We have a very well-respected track record, both in academia and in media. And we're able to do that while occupying kind of this third space that is independent, that is nonpartisan, that is non-governmental. And so we're really proud of kind of the work that we've done. Really quickly, you know, to Will's point that you have to kind of draw a picture of what the potential can be, you know, but keeping that kind of, I made a note within the spectrum of possibilities of what outcomes could look like. You know, I think painting a picture of what that risk looks like in a way that's transparent and accurate is just one important piece of the conversation when we're trying to put solutions together. So Berkeley Earth has been working on this temperature data set now for over a decade. And we are the only non-governmental source of this data globally. So all of the other producers of this data are affiliated with the government. You can see in the graphic, the NASA and the NOAA products had crude is out of the UK. There's another organization in Japan that's affiliated with their government that does a similar climate monitoring work. And then there's Berkeley Earth. And one of the motivations for developing this data set was that all of the conversation about climate and data and temperature was with the global average. We have the Paris Agreement, which is 1.5C. We have just a lot of macro level conversations that were focused at global scales and very little at local scales. We made a local product. It's a quarter degree by quarter degree. It's the highest resolution available. Essentially, we wanted to make a transparent product that was relevant to local conversations. So I'll note that this graphic was based on 1993 data. The reality is very different today, but you can just see, just based on the United States, there's very different things happening in very different parts of the country, and those are different conversations, those are different approaches. And so kind of, you know, to the point that was made earlier that not everything is monolithic, it's the same with temperature and it's the same with climate conversations. I'll note that we are currently there. I know there's a lot of information on this slide. I'll make sure to put the slide deck in the chat so you can kind of dig in if you'd like to. But we are also currently working on a new product to kind of open up the black box of climate models and climate model projections. There's a lot of kind of challenges to creating this data, and a lot of this data is paywalled behind commercial products that aren't very transparent with their methodology. We want to shift that conversation. We want to have a conversation about how you're creating these projections, what they actually represent, and what this means in applied contexts. And so, as you can see, the figure on the left is predicting essentially days over 100 degrees in Dallas between essentially today and 2100, and the figure on the right represents cooling degree days for anybody who works with utilities or in energy. That's a pretty significant metric. So we plan to have kind of a closed beta ready, hopefully by the end of September, and then the full product will launch later this year. But again, trying to shift the conversation to around what information is useful locally, not just in the global conversation, not just setting policy, but with actual day-to-day decisions, with grid scale planning, with things that are going to impact people locally in their day-to-day lives. How can we make that data more available and more accessible to them? One other quick note about the work our organization is doing. There's a lot of programs, federal programs that have been cut recently. And we are trying to kind of fill some of those gaps, as Doozy mentioned, to make sure that the data and the information and the analysis that was accessible through NOAA remains open and accessible. And so one of the main programs that we just launched earlier this year was a monthly press briefing or climate briefing series, where not only are we sharing our findings from our current monthly report, but we're also providing a live and open and accessible Q&A with our climate scientists. Anyone can show up, anyone can come and ask questions from our climate scientists and get hopefully actionable answers. We get a wide spectrum of questions ranging from, you know, very technical climate science questions to more general questions. We had quite a number of questions last month related to the floods in Texas, and what that means going forward. And so we can provide open access to our climate scientists and our data to hopefully help provide some answers and insights there. So I will keep it brief and stop there. Again, I'm hugely grateful for Bill's continued support of our organization. Up until about a few months ago, making a pitch for a data product that governments produced was not an easy sell. I think the value of our work has become kind of apparent in the last few months. And so, we're happy that we're able to continue the work we're doing. So feel free, again, I'll put these links in the chat after I finish, but you're welcome. Everyone is welcome to attend the monthly press briefing series. Our next one will be in early September. The date is still to be determined. If you work with heat exposure, if you work with temperatures, utilities, energy, and you're interested in joining the synthesis closed beta, I can have a link to our request form there as well. And then in light of Will's presentation, if you're interested in co-creating with us and you work with temperature data or any kind of climate research or climate insights would be relevant for your work, please feel free to contact me and reach out, and we can certainly discuss ways to work together. So I'll stop there. If there are any questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can talk more with Benji, I think, whose work is not quite as dry as climate data. So,
well, any questions for Kristen? Well, I know that we have reached the end of our official meeting time. Thank you all for sticking it out with us. I put in the chat some next steps. We have a link for individuals who are interested in becoming official members of the Leadership Circle. And also we have an exciting schedule of upcoming Leadership Circle meetings. September 22nd will be about nature-guided innovations in circularity, featuring Dr. John Warner. We actually also have planned for October for Vicki Hollub, the CEO of Occidental Petroleum, to join us to talk about carbon capture. And in November, we will return to a democracy-focused Leadership Circle meeting with several leading organizations in the citizen assembly and democracy space. So more to share there. And yes, so that's the end of our official time. But if anybody would like, as our practice is that we continue the conversation for as long as people are willing and interested in continuing it. So if you have to leave, you are welcome to. And if you would like to stay and chat and have any thoughts about what was shared today, what you're taking away from today, or want to discuss anything else, please jump in.